So we're going to look at the principles behind creating a fire animation, and we're going to build up our understanding of what fire is. I'm also going to take you through step by step my process in creating flames. As you can see here, you can see a few examples of some of the flames that I've recently done in my latest short film, which is not currently out yet. I had a lot of opportunity to create flames. I did them in my own sort of style, and I did them in a special style which I felt could complement the story. I'll take you through how I do that as well. But first of all, let's do a rundown of what is fire and how can we better understand it for animation purposes. The key principles. Fire is an exothermic chemical reaction. Exothermic meaning that it releases heat. It also releases light, and it can release other products. So straight away we're going to talk about the most important topics I feel that there are when talking about fire. These are things you really need to understand if you're going to be animating a flame. Now, convection is the method of heat traveling through liquids and gases. Fire is also influenced by the behaviors of the air it's surrounded by. Now, before I go into that, I'm just going to draw out what a convection current is so that you can see it clearly. Now, let's say this is the source of your heat. Let's say the substance is contained within this tank. All of this area here is going to be the hottest, so that's going to rise. But something has to take its place. Cool air that's from the sides, or it doesn't have to be air, it can be any gas or liquid, comes in from the side, so it will replace it. And you can actually see this taking effect in a lot of different flames and in explosions and steam and other things. If you look, that's not too far off. When you look at that, you can really see here how a flame might do a similar kind of thing. And you can see here how, the cold air isn't visible because it's not at a level of energy where it can emit light. So you can almost see where the flame isn't bright as being like the cold air as a negative space. So here you can see this line being defined as like the cold air coming in. So it's very, very relevant for animating flames, and that's why I've made it the first point. This is a flame that's been captured with a long exposure setting on a camera. We're able to track the patterns, the flight path of these sparks, and see where they go and how they are shaped in the air. With this flame here, it's very influenced by the wind, so there must be a strong wind going through, which is why they're all going off to this side. But I still thought it was very interesting to be able to see that in the fourth dimension, where you're able to see it over a course of time and see the characteristic of that line, of that path. We start to see the defining shape of the air. That's one example. The other thing that I'm going to just show up on screen is a fascinating way of looking at things, and it's called Schlierien optics. It's quite a difficult photographic method where you're able to see light being refracted by heat, but at an amplified rate. So I won't get into how that's done exactly. I will link you to a video, a very good video, which explains it very well. With this, we're able to see more of the convection currents than we can with the human eye. I find this really fascinating. So you can basically see the undercurrents of air that is usually hidden from our sight. So I would really recommend you check out Schlierien optics. It might give you a better understanding for how air currents work. With effects like this, air currents really do shape how the flame behaves. Another principle is wave motion. So a tongue of flame, it can be compared to a flag flapping in the wind. Let's draw another diagram here. If we have an end, let's say it's here, and it's like this, the area down here will move first, and then everything along that going outwards will be secondary to that action. So it could be a cloth, it could be a chain or a whip, or it could be a wave in the ocean. They all sort of follow this wave motion pattern, and I think flames do sometimes follow this as well. I'll do a very simple one, and I will leave the frames on so that you can see them. By the way, I'm animating right now in TV Paint, but you can apply these to anything, any program you want. You will be able to take all of these lessons, so don't feel like just because you're not using, maybe if you're not using TV Paint, that you won't be missing out in any way. You won't. They carry across into everything. So I've not done that perfectly there. It's a little bit clumsy. Kind of start to see how it flaps and waves like that. That wave like that is moved along the line. So that's a different way of looking at it. The thing with the wave motion is it's a bit of an optical illusion. It looks like it's moving away from the source, but actually it's just moving back and forth in a different way. And really what is moving is, it's more like the information is moving forward, but not the actual substance. Is you might see that a ripple like this, maybe quite an acute curve like that, starts there and then follows up like this, and you can really see it go along and up and move onwards like that. That's actually how I draw it. Is I draw the actual curves moving away, but you don't have to draw it like that. You can also draw it like a vertical line depending on your style. Light. You know, I really struggled with this for a long time until I just forced myself to actually observe how the light behaves in a flame and not what I think it does. This is what I got from that. The strongest light is generally at the heart of the flame. They only create heat at a certain temperature, at a high temperature, and then after that the ability to emit light sort of falls off. That's one thing to consider. But then these two principles, I think, are probably the biggest differences to how you're going to color your flame, and I think it will really change your whole outlook on it if you haven't been doing this before. So the brightness is strongest in the center, and it gets less bright as you go further out. The saturation is lowest at the center and generally increases further out. This isn't quite as important, but the fuel source will define the animation characteristic of the flame. And it can be in a big way. So different fuel sources release their energy at different rates. Remember, it's a chemical reaction, and the reaction happens when you have heat, fuel, and air. So if you take away any of them, you don't have a flame. Sometimes it releases it at a constant rate, but sometimes it's not a constant rate, and it might ignite more at a certain point in time and then less, and this might cause the flame to be bigger at certain stages and then smaller and vary a lot in that. Some other principles. Fire behaves differently at different scales. That's something you've got to remember. It's a pretty easy one. So a bonfire will look vastly different to a candle flickering, and so you should consider the scale of your flame. It will behave differently depending on the scale. Flames are affected by gravity and buoyancy and a certain form of surface tension. Now, I put surface tension in inverted commas because I'm not sure if it's actually surface tension. It's similar to water in that way. Like a drop of water behaves very differently to a big bathtub of water. My friend said, oh no, the flames are simple, they're easy. All you do is you create two keyframes, and you in between those two keyframes, and it alternates back and forth. So I kind of disagree with that. You can create an imitation of a flame by doing that. I don't think it will look very realistic, and I don't think it will look nearly as appealing as a real flame. Flames, they're complex, and they're also seductive, and that's partly because of the wave motion. Wave motion is very appealing. They're also very complex things. They're so complex, actually, that we can't quite figure them out when we look at them. And this creates a lot of appeal, in my opinion. They're very mysterious, and I like them. So if we can't understand a flame, but we want to capture the beauty of the flame, how do we do this? So I'll just show you really quick how you can do that. Yeah, so I kind of adapted this brush from the pack that I've got. Link in the description for that pack, by the way. made by my friend, but I developed this brush into a sort of quick flame brush. It slightly resembles a flame and it looks pretty cool, and it lets me draw a flame very quickly and very efficiently, which is why I like it. What I can do is I can start a flame. I'll start with one wave motion. So I just created a bunch of keyframes there, and I'll just add a bit of bulk to that. Let's just play that back, see how that looks. Okay, let's move these apart a bit to slow it down, make it a bit bigger. I'm going to be keeping all these extra details on the same layer. Okay. So now I'm going to build off of that. You see how I'm going to build it up in layers. We're going to move things up a bit. See what that looks like. All right. Let's add a secondary whip onto the end of this. What that looks like. See, I added a secondary ripple onto the end of the previous ripple to just add that extra complexity that I wouldn't have been able to calculate in the moment of drawing that brush stroke. Because you got to remember, like, I'm drawing one brush stroke. How many calculations can I make in that small amount of time? Not many. So let's add in just some extra things here at the bottom, some flickering of this. So some of the flames will be behaving like that. They'll be moving kind of erratically, and it's because they're just moving so fast that they're moving faster than the frame rate, basically. Let's just do one on this side now. Let's give it a bit more life. I'm able to take care of that small aspect of the animation, make sure it's flowing, make sure it's consistent and everything, before moving on to the next little piece of the animation. This allows you to build up a complex thing like a flame with relative ease. Now as it's going down, I'm going to have that trail break off a little bit. Okay, reached the end of the cycle there. I'm gonna make another one, right. I'm gonna change this one because I've just reviewed it. I think it would look better like this. A little bit more angled, so that we can create another plume from it. There. Now one thing I sort of missed with this that I think I should go back and change. With this plume, as it's rising up, it goes slightly off to the side here. And I don't want that because I'm paying attention to the convection current. The convection current is right now pushing it completely up the middle, so I want it to feel like it's in that stream of hot air. So I'm gonna just nudge it here back to where the middle is instead of it going outwards. It's a bit too fast for it to be fanning outwards just yet. It would fan outwards much closer to the top of the convection current. Let's just build that out by putting some more things at the bottom, letting them flicker. Let them be a bit erratic. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, I quite like that. I will just fix some of those frames where the flame isn't filled in here. There we go. It doesn't quite loop around because I haven't really created it to loop, but we could easily do that. If you wanted to loop this as a flame so it continued, so when we're building those details on, in the process of building them, you know how I've always started at the first frame? Well, instead of building those things on at the first frame, start a certain way in, maybe halfway in, and start building them from there. We'll just have this additional flame tongue going up the side. It's not quite finished when you get to the end, and so you carry it on the first frame again, and that helps to just loop the whole thing. I could do that a lot more, but I haven't really chosen to do that with this flame. There are a few things I've missed, of course. One of them you might point out is that I haven't done the light source properly, and in fact on my recent animation, which I think I've shown you the clips already, I decided to purposefully leave it like this, and that's because I quite liked the style of it. I thought it gave a more graphic style, which is what we were going for. It was a good way to save time. But with this example I will, and I'll show you actually a very quick shortcut that you can do in TV Paint. One of the great things about having a bitmap is that you do have different blending modes that you can brush in. So I found that dodge was quite good. So I set the brush to dodge, and I just brought down the opacity quite low so that we could get a good variable of the different levels of intensity it goes through. So what you'll see is that it brightens it up in the middle. Now the only thing about this is it doesn't quite use the saturation correctly if you have it set to dodge, and I've yet to find the right blending mode where it behaves just like the light of a flame, but I found that dodge was quite similar. When you're like me and you're creating these productions and you've got to turn them around quick and you've got to make the animation and just make it look good as fast as you can and then send it to them, then you end up finding little shortcuts like this, and they're not completely realistic, but they do add their own sort of appeal. I'll just go through like this and build up these the heart of the flame, and I would keep this to just that core bit that was the really hot part, and I wouldn't really stray into the other areas too much. And I thought it created a fairly convincing heart of the flame. And with this brush, it looks pretty nice. Ooh, there. So you see how quick that was to add in. I mean, that's how fast we're talking. I really had to knuckle down with this and create it as fast as possible. But if you didn't want to do that, I mean, there are other ways. You could actually paint it in a separate layer. Towards the middle, we bring it closer to the orange spectrum, I would say. Increase the brightness, decrease the saturation. Now, with post-production, you can tweak these, and that's what I would recommend you do. What I generally do is I increase the exposure, I increase some other things, I add sort of flares and other things, tweak the curves, bring them up a bit, just to make it that much more vivid. I would recommend that in After Effects or something similar. Let's bring it around again to do that core part of the flame. Now the saturation is really low and the brightness is really high. Brush is a little bit too soft. Anyway, that's not my strong point anyway. So that's what I meant by complexity with technique. Style. So fire can be drawn in a variety of different ways, and it can even be animated in a variety of different styles as well. What you saw there was like a brush stroke technique, so it was very painterly, And with the animation, it was quite like a ribbon, and therefore it was quite seductive, quite pleasing on the eye. But you can also create one which is really sharp and dangerous looking. So in your story, for it to serve the story, I would suggest that you think of your fire as a character. Is it aggressive or is it seductive? Is it comforting or is it alarming? And how can you represent this? Well, I sketched out a few different styles of flames. Yeah, more clean edges, had a sort of round ball at the bottom that might be good for a torch or something. With this one, a much more aggressive flame with like pointed edges. I can already imagine how that might behave in an animation. It might be just very few frames that it's looping between, and in quite a flickery way. And of course this one is more like the flame from a Zippo lighter. I hadn't done that with any reference, so it probably doesn't look exactly like a Zippo lighter. It was kind of foolish of me to not do that. So well, that one I can imagine it's sort of a much more subtle movement and just a gentle moving back and forth. Maybe with if someone's breath is nearby, maybe that would just cause it to just do that for a time. There are lots of different ways you can do this. There isn't a right way to do it really, although, you know, if you follow the principles and you're still able to create your own style of flame, then it should look good and it should look convincing, and people won't have to say, what's that? They will know that it's a flame. There is even more on this topic that I just don't have time to get into. It's a fascinating one. All of the elements are really fascinating. I'm going to be going through a lot of different elements. I might even be creating a course on elements. I'll have to see. But stay tuned on that. Check the description, because I will go back and edit the description if I do release an online course on the elements and animating the elements. Right now this is just one to see if you guys like these kind of videos, tackling effects animation. Subscribe if you haven't already. I bring out regular animation related videos. Of course, thank you very much to my Patreon supporters. Those of you supporting me on Patreon, you make a real difference to this channel, and I love to interact with you on the Patreon page. My Patreons can shoot me a message anytime and I'll always respond to them, and they get access to all of these different videos that no one else gets access to. So they get a really good deal out of it. I think it's just a really good way to support the channel as well. So consider doing that if you have the spare resources to do so. Check out animatorguild.com. It's my website. It's got a lot of different resources on it for you. Lots of different ways that you can learn animation in a quick, easy, and a thorough way. Thanks for watching. Tune in next week when I do a different subject. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.